Hello, is this on? Hello, there we go. Hello, everyone. I was not expecting a call and response. That was cheery. I feel like a supply teacher at a really nice school. I'm Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, and welcome to our event with the, and I'm going to get this right, LGBT plus Conservatives, not Q, or Tories. To our event, Labour Hates Fun, How Can the Conservatives Protect London's Nightlife? Now, this is a subject that's really close to my heart, Thank you for the contribution. This is a subject really close to my heart. Absolutely love clubbing. London, weirdly, really, really good for one particular kind of nightclubbing and then nothing else. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Great opportunity to actually just put the boot into Labour at the same time. Joining me, we have Sasha Lord, the chair of the Nighttime Industries Association. Oh, hello. Oh, that's quite all right. Chair of the Nighttime Industries Association, we have Dame Caroline Dinage, MP, Chair of the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee, Emma Best AM, the Deputy Leader of the City Hall Conservatives, and Sir Paul Swaddle, OBE, Leader of the Opposition on Westminster City Council. The format, if any of you have been to a Conservative Home event before, will be very familiar. We will have opening remarks, we will then have a discussion led by me, and then we'll throw it open to the floor for questions. And we have about an hour. So we're going to do the opening remarks. We're going to go down the table. So over to you, Sasha.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my home, to Manchester. And I have to say, the amount of flack I've given the Tories over the last few years, I was adamant that my pass wouldn't get through when Luke asked me to ask for it. So my background is I founded the Warehouse Project, which when I sold it was the world's biggest nightclub in Manchester, capacity of 10,000, and also Parklife Festival, the UK's biggest metropolitan festival. And again, when I sold it, that was a capacity of 80,000. I spent 7 years as Andy Burnham's nighttime economy advisor, and at the moment, I'm chair of the Nighttime Industries Association. I'm also, this is where the boo starts, I was a Labour Party donor. Oh, fuck off. I don't know if I'm still a Labour Party member, so I haven't renewed it. Quick turnaround. I've not renewed it, but they keep sending me letters, so I think technically I'm still a member at the moment, but I've no intent to renew it. I feel like I had the wool pulled over my eyes. The manifesto launch was in Manchester last year, the Labour Party manifesto launch. And the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, stood there and told the room that she was the Chancellor of Business, the Chancellor of Growth, and it is simply not the case. We have had nothing for nighttime economy. We have had nothing for hospitality. Independents are closing on a daily basis. We're losing a pub every week. And, you know, I talk a lot about pubs, and I'm quite precious over pubs. I think about my granddad when my grandma died. And his big thing every single day was to wait till 6 o'clock in the evening, go down to the local pub and sit there. It's not a great business model, but he'd nurse the same pint for 2 hours and see his mates. If he didn't have that, he would just be sat in his front room lonely. And so pubs serve more than just a pint. And this government simply don't get that. So they've been reckless with this industry. And on the trajectory that we're going at the moment, if it continues, there would not be one nightclub left in the UK by New Year's Eve 2029. That's how bad it is. And sadly, our screams for help have fallen on deaf ears. I think the final nail in the coffin was the rise in national insurance, and I am so fearful that what's about to come on the 26th of November. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does this sound off? I think it might be. There we go. Thank you very much. I don't know if London's panto scene is in trouble, but we do seem to have got the spirit of it here early on. No questions from you. Caroline.
Which makes me the pantomime dame. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you. I'm Caroline Dinage. I'm the chair of the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee. I've been doing that since May 2023. I've been an MP. I'm very elderly. I've been an MP since 2010. And for 2 years, I was the Culture Minister, the Digital and Culture Minister, and I was very excited about getting that role. It was February 2020, and I looked at my diary, and it showed all the exciting places I was going to be going to as Culture Minister, and then a month later, it just basically said I would be in my own front room for 2 years, because it's when COVID broke out. So I spent my 2 years as culture minister basically trying to save our culture, our historic places, our creative industries from the complete and utter devastation. And so I was responsible for the £1.5 billion Culture Recovery Fund, which did help save so many venues through the pandemic. But as you all know, many of them have struggled to recover from the pandemic, and this government have been the final nail in the coffin of so many of them that were struggling already. Why is this important? It's important for the reasons you've heard from Sasha. These are businesses. They are the lifeblood of our economy, but also they're the lifeblood of our local communities as well. You know, they are the places where people come together, where they socialise, where we tackle loneliness and social isolation. But they're also the places where, in the case of some of the live music venues and the electronic music venues, they're the places where some careers start. And our creative industries, our culture, is our global superpower. It is one of the biggest British exports. It's our calling card around the world. We're bloody brilliant at this. And so many of the global artists, DJs, performers start in the local venues, the grassroots music venues, the local clubs and pubs that they rely upon to earn their stripes, to cut their teeth, to hone their skills, you know, and we wouldn't have these globally successful artists, these huge successful stadiums and arenas without those artists having these places to learn their stuff. I come from Portsmouth, and I used to, there's a few Portsmouth people in the room today, which is obviously God's chosen city, and so my childhood, my youth was spending a lot of time in venues like the Wedgwood Rooms, which I saw so many bands which went on to sort of global superstardom, but they were doing their early performances there in venues like the Wedgwood Rooms, and those venues are shutting at the rate of 2 a week at the moment. So that's why this is important. We need this for our economy. We need our nighttime industry for our communities, but we also need it as part of our huge global exports, our standing on the world, and our global calling card, which is our creative industries.
Thank you. And over to you, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making it here today. I firstly want to start by saying I can't believe that I'm on this panel with the Sasha Lord, and I think everyone should give him a round of applause for being here. When we talk about someone that actually fiercely wants to protect the nighttime economy, that is what Sasha has done here in Manchester, and that is why Manchester is one of now the greatest cities to go out at night time. But unfortunately, when you come down to London, we've gone from competing with global cities to competing with Manchester. And with all the love to Manchester, I don't want London to compete with Manchester and Liverpool. I want it to be a global centre of nighttime economy and having a great time. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And so my line this year, for the first time, can't be we need to sack Amy LeMay, unfortunately. That one's done. But that is a move in the right direction, because actually what we had was somebody speaking out for London's nighttime economy who did not put London's nighttime economy first. They put the needs of the mayor first. And actually that's what I appreciate about someone like Sasha, is that when you appoint someone to be a night czar, you don't need to agree with them as the mayor or as the local authority. They are the spokesperson holding the flag up for the nighttime economy, and that is all they're there to do. And it is for you then to take their advice, look at it in the round, and see what you do from there. But it is that person's job to speak just for the nighttime economy and what they need. But going on from there, what we need now in London is somebody to take strategic charge of the nighttime economy and incentivise it. And we put out a report last year asking for the creation of a nighttime prosperity fund. That would be a fund with £6 million that councils could bid into, because that's the problem for councils, right, is too often it's the infrastructure around the nighttime economy which makes it unappealing for them to support it. So we need to make sure, because it's a strategic aim of London and it is important strategically for the economy in London, we need to make sure that we make it appealing for councils to invest in their nighttime economy and support them. And I think hopefully we'll get onto some of the wild examples of where especially Labour-run councils are doing crazy things as we go on in the discussion. But it's so important for a number of reasons. It's not just about the sesh. But in London, when you are getting on a crammed tube in the day, when you go home and you share in a HMO maybe with 6 other people you don't know, you need to have a reason to be in our city, and that is often the culture. That's often going out at night, and actually that's a problem we can fix easily, because fixing housing, fixing travel, those are long-term issues. But actually if we can fix the nighttime economy, in turn it will help us turn the wheels on those bigger structural problems in London. So I hope we get onto more of the what is going wrong and why Labour hates fun. There are some crazy examples here. But the first thing that needs to happen is in May, one of our biggest nighttime centres in Westminster, we need Paul to be the leader of Westminster next year.
Now that your warm-up act is finished, we can over to you.
I'll pay you later. Thank you. I'm Paul Swaddle. I am currently the leader of the opposition on Westminster Council. And clearly, Westminster is the heart of nightlife in London, and London is the heart of nightlife in the UK. Or it is today, but it's at risk. And the reason it's at risk is Labour just don't get it. They just treat it as businesses that can be taxed and taxed to death. I'm speaking to businesses right across the centre of Westminster, and they are really struggling. Their costs have gone up 20%. All of that is people costs. The only solution is to cut people. Eventually, there's nothing less to cut, and then the business fails. And that's where we are in Westminster with hospitality. And we've got to do something to save it. Labour don't get it. The Labour candidate for Soho is chairman of the Soho Society. The Soho Society has opposed 98% of all applications for licences over the last year. We think the 2% was an administrative error and that they would have if they'd have known they were going through. But that's indicative when the Labour candidate is chairing a society that is everything against what Soho is about. And yes, we do have to be respectful of residents. They are, after all, my voters. But there are things that we can do, and we need to do it on a street-by-street basis to enable businesses to trade more where they can, so that they can survive and provide entertainment and enjoyment for people from across the world.
Okay, right. This is the bit where I get to ask a few questions, I guess. So I'll probably direct a question to an individual panellist, but please, other people, if you want to speak on it, just put your hand up. So, Paul, I'm going to follow on from your remarks, because isn't one of the fundamental tensions in the way that we currently do all of this, that councillors, as you say, their voters are the people, usually a minority of local residents who are eligible to vote, turn out to vote in local elections. It's similarly a minority of people who obsessively file objections to planning permissions and everything else. So how do you, if you're running an election and you want to take over Westminster Council, presumably you're not going to be going around and saying to hell with noise complaints, say Westminster Conservatives. So what is the answer? How can you balance the interests of the night economy with the often directly contradictory preferences of your electorate?
Most people don't move to Soho for a quiet life. Yeah, it's not some sleepy village. I have got absolute sympathy with everybody that bought a house before 1780. Yeah? They've got a point. It's changed. But most people moved in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Actually, Soho was a crime-ridden place that you would not want to live in. Gosh,
Red light district, I think is the... Yeah.
And it has been cleaned up. And now it's a fantastic place to go out. There are fantastic restaurants, lots of great bars, still got some good nightclubs, and a fantastic gay scene, I believe. So now, what we do need to do is make sure those businesses are supported now, because they have to, we have to continue. But we can work with residents, and we can come up with solutions that are acceptable. It has to be done with them, because we can't just do it to people. And actually, if you look at Westminster licensing, we actually are very permissive. So the idea that things are getting turned down, it's just not the case. We've approved new licenses just this week for premises in Westminster.
Okay. Emma, what's City Hall's role in this? Because I think sometimes when we're trying to work out the catastrophe of who's responsible for the catastrophe of what's happened to the night economy, responsibility is divided, licensing is with councils and so on. So we all know that the mayor appointed an absolutely useless night czar, infamously, but what could he be doing? What is his function?
Yeah, so I think,
ideally?
unfortunately, the City Hall response was not my problem, Gov. I think I've appointed Amy LeMay, let her get on with it. And until last year, that was the mayor's intervention. And the problem there is in things where Paul's talking about, for example, with licensing, is why wasn't Amy LeMay, why wasn't City Hall sending somebody to these licensing hearings to make the case? But I do think, to Paul's point, this is where we need to help councils out, and we need to make it more strategic wide across London. We need to identify where are there nighttime zones that are important to the London economy, where is it not appropriate to put a 24-hour club, next to a care home, for example. Let's make those things clear, but let's make it clear where we are investing in the nighttime economy and where councillors will be expected to be approving schemes. And I think there has to be said something, so just in terms of the residents, something has to be said about the silent majority, which is so often the case, I think you'll find in some of these zones. So, for example, when I speak to people in Hackney, where they've put in some of the most draconian licensing measures, 11 p.m. Is the maximum you'll be allowed to have a late night venue on a weekday, and 12 o'clock on a Saturday. When you speak to the majority of Hackney residents, they're horrified. They're horrified at their Labour Council for that. So maybe the loud majority have been listened to, but actually electorally, I think it is absolutely not helpful for councillors to listen to the loud majority.
Okay. You mentioned 24-hour clubs. I don't know if they're legal, but maybe we should put repealing the Public Order Act on the back on the agenda, get the free party scene back going. Caroline, you're on the Select Committee. Again, sort of, what's the Select Committee been doing on this? But also, what can Westminster do? Because so many of the decisions that really affect nightclubs and pubs and so on, they're all in local government.
Yeah, it's an issue that just keeps coming backwards and forwards to us as a Select Committee, and we've done a number of inquiries which we've kind of looked at this as part of it. So we kicked off a couple of years ago. We started an inquiry into grassroots music venues, because they were in crisis, shutting at the rate of 2 a week, and some really sort of iconic venues. And as part of that, we did roundtables with a huge number of the venues. We got a bunch of the venues in London into Parliament to come and have a chat with us, rather than just sort of calling 2 or 3 to give evidence to a Select Committee. We actually brought in about sort of 50 of them and had sort of a bit of kind of almost like speed dating, where we got to the committee got to see a huge number of them, and so we made a number of recommendations as part of the grassroots music venues. Then spoke to Michael Kill, who runs the Nighttime Industries Association, and he said, we'd really love you to do something a little bit more which focuses on electronic music. So we went to the drum sheds. We actually, unfortunately not when it was sort of operational and everyone was sort of partying. It was sort of about 9 o'clock in the morning. But they very sweetly laid on another round table, and it was pretty cool, actually. It was one of the coolest places I've ever held a parliamentary meeting. They basically set up 2 round tables right in the middle of that enormous, great big, for those of you not familiar, the drum sheds is basically what was an IKEA. And it's got this huge cavernous room, a bit like this, with the black walls, but about a million times bigger. And they set up these 2 round tables in the middle of it. And we heard from so many of the venues about the issues. And we're trying to find interesting and sneaky ways of bringing their issues into what we do. So I put in an amendment, New Clause 59 it was, to the Planning Infrastructure Bill about the agent of change principle, to put it on a statutory footing. It's a little bit geeky, but basically, as you've heard, what can happen is you can have a really sort of long-standing venue, pub, club, nightclub, that's live music venue that's been there forever, and a block of flats goes up next to it, and suddenly all these complaints go in about noise, and it just feels so deeply unfair. It's not just in London. I mean, it happened more and more in London, but actually when we were visiting Manchester, we held our roundtable at the Night and Day Cafe, and about 30 or 40 venues from across the north came to meet us. The people who own the Night and Day Cafe were not there because that day they were in court because they'd been taken to court over a noise issue, a licensing issue, because some person who lived in a flat that was nearby but had been built, decades after the Night and Day Cafe opened, had complained about noise. The irony was that on the day that they were in court, this bloke had already moved out. And Night and Day Cafe nearly shut down as a result of the cost of fighting this legal battle. It's mad, it's unsustainable, and about a quarter of grassroots music venues closed due to licensing issues. So we're trying to find as many interesting and sneaky ways of, my amendment didn't go through, but it did get the backing of 5 different political parties from, right across the spectrum. So it shows that a lot of people care about this. Even sneaky ways, like we're doing an inquiry into built heritage at the moment, and you'd think built heritage would be sort of churches and historic listed buildings, but there's a part of it that we're looking at some of those more modern iconic buildings that are part of our modern music history and our pubs and bars that are sort of iconic, we know that there are some unbelievably iconic music venues like in Manchester Hacienda, but in London GAY has just shut down, as you probably all know. And can we look at some of these venues as part of our inquiry into built heritage, because they are part of our modern cultural heritage. So there's a few things that we're up to.
Ah, excellent. If you're looking for a club where you can have a 9 a.m. meeting and there might still be people there, I believe the last entry to Egg in King's Cross is 6.
Oh, that's well. I mean,
God knows who's there, but you may well be able to have some ravers around.
The thing that really impressed me about Drum Sheds is that they do a kind of daytime rave sort of geared towards my sort of age group, where you might have been a bit of a raver in the 90s, but you want to get home for the babysitter and you don't want to be on the late night bus, so they do like a daytime rave session. So I'm well up for that.
That is sadly that is literally nearly every trance event now, because trance has about 5 new fans in the last 10 years.
Oh.
So we all just go to day raves. Sasha, how does this keep ending up falling through the cracks? Because I'm in a slightly similar boat to you. Before the election, obviously I worked for Conservative Home, but I gave Labour quite a lot of rope on housing. And it looked like they were going to do some fairly good stuff, and have been crushingly disappointed. Similarly with the night economy, you know your stuff. You worked with Andy, you became a Labour donor, you presumably thought that they were going to do some good things. How is it that this particular industry, this particular sector, keeps getting let down by successive parties?
I just don't think the politicians understand, not all politicians, understand the importance of the nighttime economy. It's the 5th biggest sector in the whole of the UK. It's the 3rd largest employer. Sadly, since the last budget, mainly down to the NI increase, we've lost 110,000 jobs in this sector, more than any other sector, mainly from small independents. And I don't know about you, but if I'm going to go out and buy a sandwich or have a coffee, I'd much rather go to a family-run business than go somewhere that's the same uniform, the same menu on every single high street. It misses that personal touch. I don't think they fully understand what it brings into the economy. So on a personal level, when Part Life was on, it brought £13 million into the local economy, into Greater Manchester, if you think about taxis, pubs, bars, restaurants, hotel rooms, new outfits. Warehouse Project used to bring £14 million into the local economy. And they're not getting to grips with these stats at all. They think it's just going out just a pint, or it's just going out to have a meal. And in a way, I kind of understand it, because that is when you go out to let your hair down. Unless you're properly in the industry and entwined in it, you don't really understand, the nuts and bolts that go behind it. But I honestly thought we had a knight in shining armour with Keir Starmer, and I'll be honest, it's not just his policy of the nighttime economy. I mean, the first big thing he came out was freezing pensioners. I mean, who's advising him? I have absolutely no idea at all. I know I put I didn't go to the Labour Party conference last week. I didn't want to go. It was pointless, because if they're going to not tell me the truth at the Labour Party manifesto launch, then what's the point of false words at the Labour Party conference? And the people that did speak out, actually, there's someone in this room, I just seen him, people that did speak out had the pass withdrawn at the event. It's pathetic. I personally think we need new leadership at the top of Labour. I think the Cabinet's let us down. You know, I know a couple of, one MP that recently resigned, you can probably guess who I'm talking about, and another MP who was sacked. He didn't even have the guts to pick up the phone and speak to them himself. It's just poor, and sadly somebody has to step in very quickly and resolve the issue we've got with the nighttime economy, because as I said, we're the 5th biggest sector in the whole of the UK. When you look at festivals and nightclubs, the world used to look at us with envy. Not anymore. And you talk about Eamon May. Well, I had to sit on my hands for 7 years. I wasn't allowed to say anything about Eamon May, but I can now. I loved Eamon May because she made me look so bloody good. Honestly, what a waste of taxpayers' money. What a waste of complete space. When I was first brought on to advise Andy Burnham, the first thing I did was made an appointment to go and see Eamon May, because there was only 2 of us at the time in the UK. It was a 10 o'clock appointment, so I had to get the 13 minutes past 7 a.m. train. It was an early start for me. I pulled into Euston and she emailed me to cancel. The second time I turned up with colleagues from Andy Burnham's office to an appointment to see her at City Hall, she forgot about the meeting, and we'd all made and the whole COVID period, you know, I was out there constantly fighting on a daily basis. Probably not popular to say this, but I was the one that took Matt Hancock to court and got them to withdraw the 10 p.m. curfew. And do you remember the Scott Jag ruling?
It was stupid.
I mean, we can all agree that was stupid, surely. They dropped that as well. And I spent my time building the foundations for Greater Manchester, knowing that when we reopened, a lot of those businesses would need the help, need the support, and they would need the foundations to bounce back. And we did that. And London sat on their hands, so I'm not surprised. And I love London. I'm in London next weekend. You know, we all stay in the same hotel. We have a great time. You know, there's some incredible restaurants down there. But I used to be really jealous of Soho 5-6 years ago. I used to look at it. I'd love something like that in Manchester. Yeah. And now my friends are going to Soho and saying at 1 a.m, there's nothing going on at all. There's a real job to be done. I think during her tenure, and it's not just her, it was her office as well, it stagnated. I think the new idea now of a commission is a much better idea. And the difference between mine and Eamon May's role was I was allowed to say and do exactly what I wanted to. And Andy Burnham understood that my role was hospitality, nighttime economy. And there were times that we disagreed, but he allowed me to do that. The obvious one for me is Eat Out to Help Out. Yeah. I thought it was a fantastic initiative that Sunak brought in. As when he reduced VAT to 5% and 12.5%, again, incredible, save businesses, save jobs. So wearing my nighttime economy hat, my role, Andy, this is amazing for Greater Manchester, it's going to save businesses and save jobs. He thought the money could have been spent elsewhere, and I get that. You know, we didn't have a public disagreement, but we disagreed on that point. I was allowed to do that. Amy was just a nodding dog for Sadiq, that was it, and she wasn't allowed to do anything at all. Yeah. I had a commission below me, so we'd meet on a monthly basis. It was made up of councillors, NHS, police, operators, hoteliers, taxi drivers. There were probably 40 to 50 people in the room. I like to think I'm always right. I'm not. My wife always tells me I'm not, if ever. But we'd come up with the solutions ourselves. Amy didn't have that. It was her speaking directly to Sadiq and one person. Have you got 32 boroughs in London? Yeah, 32. He's 10 in Manchester, and that was a full-time job. Yeah. So the whole thing was just flawed from the start.
Yeah. Can I quickly say, because I think, Sasha, you do yourself down saying there was one difference between you and Amy LeMay. There was clearly a lot of differences, but I think one of the most important ones is Sasha did that role, I hope you don't mind me saying, for free, funneling money into Manchester's economy. Amy LeMay took almost £1 million out of Londoners' pockets and left us with a nighttime economy that was worse.
I think one thing I'd say is that Labour just aren't listening to the nighttime economy. I was utterly shocked when I started meeting with businesses across Westminster as part of our listening programme, to be talking to businesses saying that the council senior political leadership refuse to meet with them. They just won't meet them. And I'm going out, sitting and doing roundtables in Soho, talking to businesses in the hospitality sector. I'm doing a walkabout with the Business Alliance and seeing and hearing their problems and the challenges they've got. And that's what we should be doing to make sure that we actually understand what needs to be done. Otherwise, what we are is a load of politicians trying to pull some levers, but we don't know what they're connected to. So what's really important is to get out and talk and understand what will actually make a difference. And that's why I'm very proud of the record of Westminster Council under the Conservatives, who launched Alfresco in Soho and opened up Soho, and it became the place to go, probably one of the few places that was open in London, because the rest of London wasn't, as you said, wasn't doing anything. But we got it open, and we saved a lot of businesses because of that. And by the way, there are plenty of places open later in Soho, and I'm sure we can take you to some.
I mean, the Black Book is last entry at 12, but serves until 1. Where is there after that?
I mean, even just there's a lot of places. I mean, I'm even thinking of the one. There's the one at the end of my office, which is open till 4, and that's just a burger place that serves meat liquor, and that serves beer and wine and cocktails and, you know, actually, nightclubs. Less so. I'm getting to the point where I don't do so many of those anymore. But
I suppose actually, as a public service, we should probably have had a handout with them, secret information where you can go in London for a night out.
Don't worry. I think if you contact LGBT Tories, they'll give you a list of places around Soho are open and fun all night.
Use it at your own risk.
Anyway, if I could just say to that point, though, and I think Paul is probably completely right being in the Westminster, but this is the change that those of us experience outside of Westminster or knowing, is that when I was younger, I could turn up to Soho and aimlessly walk around the street and just wander into place after place after place, and who knows where I was or what I was doing, and get home. Now, if you can achieve that, you can achieve that, but you have to plan it meticulously, and you have to know when you're going, when you have to leave, and what the restrictions are on your being there. So you can still do it, but not with this in the same way.
Yeah, we've all had the forlorn experience of a group gradually shedding members as you're all on your phones trying to find somewhere. Now, I am going to go to the questions in a second, but given this is called Labour Hates Fun, and I think my brain short-circuited when I read this document, I do just want to ask Paul to briefly outline the Westminster After Dark proposal.
So Westminster After Dark, I thought actually sounded like it might be useful. It was launched by the Labour Party as part of their election campaign in 2022. What it turned out to be is a load of hollow promises to everybody. So they promised to residents to do all sorts of things about basically closing stuff, restricting, etc., while at the same time using the same policy to promise businesses that they would be opening up and helping and being useful. What they've ended up with is something that does nothing for anybody. So it's actually a really lame, pointless policy document that serves no great purpose. What we need is to take a proper approach, and Soho is different. Soho is not the rest of London. And Westminster is much more than just Soho. We've got nearly 4,500 licensed premises in a population of 200,000 people. You know, for us to try and keep them all going during COVID, we'd have had to have been fairly party. We are different in that context than your Kingstons or your Richmonds. But we do need a nighttime economy right across London. It's not just about Westminster. It's about, you know, your local club that you used to go to when you were obviously 18, out in whichever borough you happen to live in. And certainly when I used to go out in Kingston as a teenager, and that club is still operational as a business, but that's what you do need everywhere. You need those clubs and those venues for you to be able to go to and enjoy. Mm.
There are 3 night economy zones in the Westminster After Dark strategy, and Soho isn't one of them. One of them is a bit of Oxford Street, one of them is, I think, a bit of Victoria Street, and then one of them is a bit around Charing Cross Station.
Yeah, what they've done is very cleverly chosen some places to sort of distract people away from Soho and say, don't look there, look over here. None of which are wanted by the industry or the residents. What we want is actually a vibrant and thriving nighttime economy in the West End, which is not just Soho, but obviously Chinatown and St James's and all the bars and clubs around that area. that service a wide range of people. And, you know, I'm not out in Soho every night drinking because that's not what I do now, but nor should I be. You know, it would be ruining Soho if I was.
No,
Soho's
for everyone.
If I was 18 and I saw myself coming down the street the other way, I would probably be thinking, where have I gone wrong? How did this happen? What street am I? You know, and I used to go to Greek Street and party when I was a teenager, and it was great. That doesn't mean I should be there now, but there are plenty of places for people of all ages across Westminster.
Was it not Westminster that objected to Greg selling hot sausage rolls after 11? Brilliant.
I'm just going to say very strongly that there is no, you're never too old to go night clubbing, just to be clear. Right, I am now going to throw the floor open to questions. The usual rules apply. It's for questions, not statements. It's also for relatively short questions. If you need to give a speech before you ask your question, you should have been on the panel. Because we've just had a very interesting discussion about it. There is a gentleman with a microphone at the back, so please don't start speaking until you've got it, because we are live streaming and we want everyone to be able to hear your questions. So we'll start with this gentleman here.
The topic is nighttime economy, but do you think there is a general shift now towards a slight, with Drumheads is a great example of where, I'm from Enfield by the way, Leach Henry local councillor, that we should be shifting and looking maybe at some of these, if people are trending towards more daytime based stuff, actually shifting our focus on getting things happening during the late day, afternoon even, early morning for some.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I think the one thing I did agree with Westminster After Dark policy, it actually was 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So it's actually about everything from early evening right through late night. And it's not just about entertainment starting at 11. You know, there are things, you know, actually as we're seeing in Westminster, we're seeing a lot of people moving to more experiential stuff. And, you know, whether it be axe throwing or escape rooms, that mix of stuff is a change in the economy of the evening entertainment market, because it's not all alcohol-led now. And that's the other thing, is that there's a big shift away from it being alcohol-led, and therefore we need to make sure that the industry is supported, because it's not all about licensed premises. It's about a variety of entertainment.
Is there not a chicken and egg problem here? Because we're talking. I'll come to the buzz. We're chicken and egg problem here. We've talked about, you know, it's impossible to go out on a spontaneous night out. Pubs are all dying, and then we see a trend towards people doing non-alcohol-led things and going axe throwing. And is there not we could say, people's tastes are changing, maybe we should lean into that. But could that also not be, people need something to do and all the pubs are shutting?
I think that's exactly right. I think it's definitely a chicken and egg situation, and it's lovely that the drum sheds are putting on events for people of my age group who, you know, are sort of, you know, harking back to the sort of halcyon days of our youth in the 90s and maybe even earlier. But is that partly because they have to sweat the assets, because actually otherwise they're just not going to be able to keep the lights on, and that's a lovely byproduct. But sometimes they do it because they don't have any alternative. And actually, I think my children are quite nostalgic for my youth, because of the number of options we had, because of the variety of places that we could go on a night out without having sort of premeditated our plan for the evening. And their options are so much more limited. And we know the modern generation may be a little bit more, maybe take care of a little bit more of their liver than my generation did. But even if they do want to go for a night out, there's no longer the options for them to take, and and the knock-on effect of that is the things we spoke about at the beginning. It's the lack of opportunities for the community, the impact on small businesses, and then the long-term impact on things like tourism, which is a huge driver of our economy, on our creative industries, on our culture, on our way of life. And this thing is bigger than someone just being able to go out and have a good old boogie until 3 o'clock in the morning, as much as we love that.
Gentleman in the front row there.
Hi there, Bradley Fage, City Hall Conservatives. My question's for Sasha. First of all, thank you very much for coming along today. I'm sure everyone here really appreciates it. Twofold. So, obviously, you spoke about a lot of the policies that are coming from the government top down, NI, jobs tax, things like that. They're obviously impacting cities all across the country, but more disproportionately in London. So, cities like Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, they're all navigating these against a challenging backdrop. But what has London got to do, or what has the mayor got to do specifically to buck that trend and combat it? And secondly, on the Night Czar, the mayor sacked Amy May a year ago, and I think to my knowledge, he still doesn't have somebody in place. What has the next person, whoever it is, got to do and come in immediately, and what sort of calibre of person should he be recruited for, really, to try and buck this?
So I'll start with the second one first, because I've already forgotten the first one. So the second one, I don't think it should be a salaried role. I think he needs to look at the role of Greater Manchester. He needs to be somebody who has experience in the industry. I am confident if I said to Amy May, what's the GP and a pint of beer, she wouldn't be able to tell me that. And, you know, it's basics like that. You need to have a complete understanding of everything to do with the nighttime economy. I think he has appointed a commission of people. I'm fairly confident he has, with a chairman who's, I've forgotten his name, I think he's called Luke.
Luke from Fabric.
From Fabric, yes. Yeah. The guy who owns Fabric, he's chairing it. And that's essentially similar to the task force that I had. You do need a voice to come out of that. You can't have a committee of people speaking about it. There's got to be one voice. But I would say he needs to come out of the traps quickly. Give that task force full autonomy to do what they want. Obviously, they can't spend what they want. But just get cracking and just stop denying. You know, for me, I'm seeing so many tweets coming out of the London office say, oh, everything's great, everything's fantastic. It's not. It really isn't. And, you know, when I go to London, I'm a tourist and I love London, but it's not what it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think it can be dragged back again, but there's a lot of work to be done. And as I said previously, the work that was done for Greater Manchester, for Liverpool, for Leeds, Newcastle, Sheffield during COVID was lacked in London. But it absolutely can be brought back. You know, it's the capital of the UK. Everybody in the world is jealous of London. It's such a great, fantastic city. And, you know, there are still some amazing nightclubs there. Drumsheds, obviously, Fabric, Ministry. But you're losing more clubs than any other city region. And obviously that's going to be the case because you're bigger. But the rot needs to stop. And that, I said something actually a couple of weeks ago that the tabloids picked up on. I was talking about Keir, you know, fish rots from the head. And ultimately, that's where the finger's got to be pointed.
Show of hands, please. The gentleman at the back row there.
Good afternoon, folks. Joe from York. Everyone's speaking here about big cities. What about the smaller places? Sasha, you alluded to maybe the pubs, the importance of the community. So it's from village here to big cities. But we're talking about big cities here. What importance would you say about those maybe not the big cities? For example, I'll give you an example, the buckshop. That's a hub of fun, I think. But the Labour Council in York sort of delayed, and that sort of thing on such a small thing. Probably not night time, but it's a bookshop, a place of fun.
This is turning into a speech, so question, please.
What's your thought on that, where we should probably apply that to more the smaller places like York,
well,
that sort of thing?
Actually, and interestingly, a pattern is emerging now. Obviously, there's a cost of living crisis. People don't have the funds to go out. Even in Manchester, you know, you'd have to get a bus into town, a taxi back, although we do have the nighttime buses now. More often than not, a taxi back, you probably go to a pub, then into a club after. People don't have the money to do that week in, week out. We're seeing a pattern now where people are staying local, supporting their local pub, supporting the local economy. So I suspect in the next 12, 24 months, we're going to see those suburbs do better than they have been doing.
But at the same time, what we are seeing is the inquiry we did into grassroots music venues shows that a lot of these small music venues are shutting. and often these small music venues can be pubs that put on a live act. And one of the reasons for that is they can't get the bands or the artists because it's become so expensive now to put on a tour. It used to be the way that it used to be the way that an artist would get known, but it also used to be the way that they'd earn a bit of cash. But these days it's so expensive to do it that I think we had a statistic where the average tour 10 years ago had about 20, 25, 30 gigs on it, and now the average tour by a band has 12, and so that's a lot of like smaller cities, bigger towns that are missing out on these people, these artists coming to their neighborhood. And when they come, that's people who are going for a few drinks, maybe going for something to eat, parking their car, having a night out in order to see a live band, and all that has an impact on a community. But I think it's also quite important to kind of turn it on its head and think about how our culture and hospitality has got the potential to regenerate areas as well. And I don't think enough councils around the country are imaginative when they think about the regeneration power of how, not only can having a focus on these sort of venues help bring a community together, but actually they can drive so much investment and so much economic potential if they're done in the right way. And I don't think that there's enough imagination when regeneration is spoken about, of thinking about how you put sort of culture and heritage and hospitality at the centre of that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I remember at one point I was in a tiny town in Northern Ireland which hasn't had a nightclub in 15 years, but apparently when it did, Cascada played it, which is really a sign of how granular tours used to be. But just a quick follow-up: what is it that's making touring so expensive? Is it because that doesn't feel like why is touring so much more expensive now? Because that doesn't feel like a licensing issue or anything like that.
It's a massive combination of things. I mean, it's the cost of venues, and licensing is a part of it. It's also just the cost of travelling, and if they're travelling abroad, then there's that comes with a whole load of extra things with it as well. But yeah, I mean, it was just a combination of things that mean that now a tour is likely to be a loss leader rather than a profit making thing. There's also issues around the merch that venues sell, that artists sell, which often is the thing that makes the money. And some venues, in order for them to keep their heads above water, will charge a percentage, would take a percentage of the cost of the merch, and so there's no money to be made on that. And so when you add it all together, it all makes a tour unprofitable.
How horrifying! I didn't know about that. Right, show of hands again, please. We'll have the gentleman there.
Speaking the furthest away.
Thanks. The fundamental problem is chancellors of just see pubs as cash machines, and the tax and regulation is through the roof, and it's become a complete luxury to go for a night out in the pub now, where it used to be accessible to everybody. But to try and be a bit more positive, at the local level, I'm rather sceptical that small numbers of local people can't cause enormous trouble for pubs, and I think in London. But what more can be done locally to improve the quality of the nighttime economy? And a couple of areas would be things like crime. It's never going to be a great night out if you get your phone nicked. And the other one is around kind of traffic reduction. And obviously during COVID there was much more al fresco dining and that kind of thing, much more pleasant. It always staggers me the amount of cars and things that are able to drive through like really crowded parts of the West End. What more can be done in those two areas to make a better experience?
Can I talk on the crime issue? Yeah. I mean, I sit on licensing on Westminster, and I did that because I wanted to make sure I understood the whole process. But the police turn up and they object to licenses, and their primary objection is that the customers will become victims of crime. Now, that is not against the licensing objective, becoming a victim. They should not be victim blaming the customer. They should be working out how to police our city properly to ensure that the nighttime economy can thrive. But you can't, if a venue was going to create crime and the publican or the landlord or the venue owner was encouraging bad behaviour, that's different. But this is just about them becoming victims of crime, and that is just wrong. And I will, every time it's said on a licensing panel, I call it out.
Just to come, I mean, nothing is going to get away from the cost of business being the biggest driver of this. And if we go back to the damages with unemployment after this budget, half of those job losses came in the hospitality sector. So we were talking earlier about how the hospitality sector's changed. It's more bottomless brunches, axe throwing. But essentially across the hospitality business, until the cost of doing business is addressed, there's going to be a consistent wave of issues. But we can do more on the granular, regional and local level to help, and part of that is that crime, and that's why I talked about creating that £6 million nighttime prosperity fund to do exactly that. So when in Westminster the police say this is going to create a safety issue, we look at the infrastructure around where that venue is and say, well, we could actually fund for some late night patrols, we could fund for some lighting, we could improve the bus shelter, perhaps get CCTV there. How can we address those concerns? And that's what that £6 million fund would do, is look at things like the policing. But I think policing in London and the effect that has on the nighttime economy needs its entire separate panel.
But also don't forget that the Labour government changes to national insurance contributions, employer national insurance contributions, doesn't just impact the venues that we're talking about, it also impacts the police. I mean, that's put an extra £60 million onto the cost to the Metropolitan Police, and so they have less money for policing, and so they're more risk averse when it comes to licensing. And this is the sort of ill thought through way of going about business of this government. You know, they whack out a national insurance increase and then completely forget of all the sectors that it's going to be that's going to be impacted by it.
It's an interesting, rather bleak pattern, isn't it, with things like the police and indeed the fire brigade, is you set up a public service to mitigate the dangers and the cost of doing something, and eventually they realise their lives would be easier if they just lobbied against the thing instead. Yeah. Actually, one quick question, because I don't know how much time we have left. Sasha, we've heard a lot about we haven't really touched on the police. Now, the Metropolitan Police, obviously quite infamous for objecting to pasty shops and all the rest of it, but when you were in Manchester, what was your experience with the Greater Manchester Police? Because does that contrast? Did you have similar problems?
Originally, there were issues in the first couple of years, and then Greater Manchester went into special measures, and there was a new chief that came in. It's chalk and cheese now. It's completely turned it around. We work, when I say we, the sector work alongside the police. They work with the police. It's quite rare that you'll see an objection. If I do see an objection or a review, it's normally I'll agree with it. But there were incidents where there was the odd objection during my 7-year period that I disagreed with, and actually I'd turn up and argue against that. And I'm fine arguing against the police. You know, as long as the licensing objectives are covered, they shouldn't be able to complain. Which is why I found the hot sausage roll thing so ludicrous. But no, it is very, very good, the relationship with the police here.
Okay, perfect. Now, I think we have time for one question. It really does have to be short, so I'm going to be a complete fascist about this one. Well, that guy, he's very keen. Right, front row. Genuinely, you've got like 10 words and a question mark. But,
okay, I'll be dead quick. Sasha, so you've heard how the Conservative Party are the party that is pro-business and pro the nighttime economy. So do you think that there's a good chance that you can work more closely with the Conservative Party, or maybe even join us in the not too distant future?
Question mark.
So I always have. I'm not tribal at all. During COVID, I had many, many really good positive meetings with Paul Scully at the time, who I thought was, a fantastic MP. This Thursday, I'm meeting Daisy Cooper in London. I want to work with anybody who will support the nighttime economy, the fifth biggest industry. The fact that I'm sat here today, it's a Tory party conference. I mean, I think that speaks volumes. I will work with anyone. I'm not rejoining Labour at the moment. That's a fact. If there was new leadership, I'd reconsider that.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, it is almost 3 o'clock, which means that we, like Westminster Council's Ideal Nightclub, have to call it quits. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our wonderful panel. And if you want to see even more of me, and potentially some other people, I will be doing our next Conservative Home event in here in about half an hour on how we build the homes we need. Thank you very much.
Yeah.